She never imagined that marrying her ex's uncle out of spite would lead to the greatest love of her life, or that one night of passion would make her a mother of 4. Elena Martinez stood frozen in the doorway of the Blackwood family's sprawling estate, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. Through the French doors leading to the garden, she could see him, David, her boyfriend of 3 years, with his tongue down another woman's throat. The same David who'd promised her forever just last week. The same David who'd invited her to his family's anniversary celebration tonight. Her hands trembled as she gripped her purse, the engagement ring she'd been secretly hoping for tonight, now feeling like a cruel joke. The woman in David's arms was everything Elena wasn't: blonde, petite, probably from old money like the Blackwoods. Elena's dark hair and curves suddenly felt inadequate, her teacher's salary embarrassingly modest. Quite the show, isn't it? Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. If you're tuned in and ready for today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be sharing another story that's just as captivating, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now let's dive right in. Elena spun around to find a man leaning against the marble pillar behind her, a crystal tumbler of whiskey in his hand. She recognized him immediately, James Blackwood, David's uncle. At 42, he was devastatingly handsome in that distinguished way that came with age and success. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his steel-gray eyes held a mixture of amusement and something deeper. Understanding, perhaps. "I'm sorry, I should go," Elena whispered, mortified that someone had witnessed her humiliation. "Why? You're not the one who should be ashamed." James took a slow sip of his whiskey, his gaze never leaving her face. "My nephew is an idiot." Elena felt tears threatening to spill. 3 years. 3 years I wasted on him. Not wasted. Invested in learning what you don't want. James straightened, and Elena noticed how tall he was, how his expensive suit fit his broad shoulders perfectly. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" "What do you mean?" A slow smile spread across James's face, and Elena felt something flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with heartbreak. "I mean, my dear nephew thinks he's untouchable. That he can treat people like disposable toys. Maybe it's time someone taught him otherwise." Elena stared at him, confused. "I don't understand. There's a wedding chapel 20 minutes from here. Vegas style, open all night." James finished his whiskey and set the glass on a nearby table. Imagine David's face when he finds out his ex-girlfriend married his uncle. "That's insane," Elena breathed, but she didn't step away. "Is it? Or is it justice?" James moved closer, and Elena caught the scent of his cologne. Expensive, masculine, intoxicating. "I'm not talking about a real marriage, Elena. Just a piece of paper to ruffle some feathers. We can annul it quietly in a few weeks." Elena looked back toward the garden where David was now openly groping the blonde woman, not caring who saw. The humiliation burned in her chest, mixing with a rage she'd never felt before. "He told me he loved me this morning," she whispered. "And I'm sure he meant it, in his own selfish way. David loves the idea of love, but he's never learned to actually commit to it." James's voice was gentle but firm. "You deserve better than being someone's placeholder." Elena met his eyes, seeing something there that made her pulse quicken. James Blackwood was dangerous, not in a threatening way, but in the way that made smart women do foolish things. He was successful, sophisticated, and looking at her like she was the most interesting person in the room. "Why would you do this? Help me, I mean." James was quiet for a long moment, his expression growing serious. "Because I've watched my nephew break hearts for years, and no one's ever called him on it. Because you seem like a genuinely good person who doesn't deserve this treatment." He paused, then added quietly, "While you were in the ladies' room at the party." James's expression was unreadable. "I told you, Elena. I don't do anything halfway." Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, was it? The way James was looking at her, the careful preparation, the intensity in his gray eyes. It felt like something much more dangerous than a prank. "Next," the clerk called, and suddenly they were standing before Elvis, who was surprisingly dignified despite his rhinestone jumpsuit. "Dearly beloved," Elvis began in a surprisingly good impression of the king's voice, "we are gathered here tonight to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Elena's hands were shaking as James took them in his. His touch was warm, callousing from what she assumed was sailing or golf, and completely steady. When she looked up into his eyes, the rest of the chapel faded away. "Do you, James Alexander Blackwood, take Elena Maria Martinez to be your lawfully wedded wife. I do, James said, and his voice was so serious, so certain, that Elena forgot how to breathe. And do you, Elena Maria Martinez, take James Alexander Blackwood to be your lawfully wedded husband? Elena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. This was insane. She was marrying a man she'd met 3 hours ago, a man who was her ex-boyfriend's uncle, a man who made her feel things she'd never felt with David despite 3 years together. Elena. James's voice was gentle, questioning. She looked into his eyes and saw something that made her heart stop. He wasn't just going through the motions. There was something real there, something that made this feel less like revenge and more like destiny. I do, she whispered. Then by the power vested in me by the great state of Nevada and the spirit of rock and roll, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Elvis grinned. You may kiss the bride. James stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. Are you sure? He asked quietly, so only she could hear. Instead of answering, Elena rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. The world exploded. James's lips were warm and firm, and when he deepened the kiss, Elena felt like she was falling off a cliff. These weren't the sweet, predictable kisses she'd shared with David. This was fire and desperation and something so intense it made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. James's eyes were dark with something that made Elena's entire body flush with heat. Well, he said roughly, that was unexpected. The drive back to James's penthouse was silent, charged with an electricity that made the air feel thick. Elena kept stealing glances at the simple gold band on her finger. When had he gotten rings? And trying to process what had just happened. Elena, James said as they rode the elevator to his floor. We should talk about. Don't, Elena interrupted, turning to face him. Don't rationalize this. Don't make it logical. What are you saying? Elena stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I want to do something completely irrational. James's control snapped. He backed her against the elevator wall, his mouth finding hers with a hunger that made her gasp. His hands tangled in her hair, and Elena could taste the whiskey on his lips, could feel the barely restrained power in his body as he pressed against her. Elena, he groaned against her mouth. If we do this. We're already married, she whispered, nipping at his lower lip. What's one more crazy decision? The elevator dinged, and James pulled back, his chest heaving. My apartment. Now. Elena had never seen anything like James's penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and everything was sleek, modern, expensive. But she barely noticed the decor because James was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Are you sure about this? He asked one more time, his voice rough with desire and something deeper. Elena answered by reaching for the zipper of her dress. What happened next was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. James worshipped her body like she was precious, like she was a gift he'd never expected to receive. He was gentle and demanding, patient and desperate, and when he whispered her name against her skin, it sounded like a prayer. Afterward, as they lay tangled in his silk sheets, Elena traced patterns on his chest and tried to understand what had just happened to her life. James, she whispered. Isn't it? James moved closer, and Elena could see the storm brewing in his gray eyes. You felt it too last night, Elena. Don't pretend you didn't. The way you responded to me, the way you said my name. Stop. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Just stop. Her phone buzzed from her purse, and Elena grabbed it gratefully, desperate for any distraction. The screen showed 17 missed calls from David and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. Where are you? Elena, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. Call me back. I know you're upset, but running off with my uncle is insane. Elena, call me now. He knows, Elena said, her voice hollow. James glanced at the phone and shrugged. Good. Maybe now he'll understand there are consequences to his actions. You don't understand. David, he doesn't handle rejection well. He's going to make this a nightmare for both of us. Let him try. James's voice was cold, dangerous. I've been dealing with my nephew's tantrums for years. He doesn't scare me. Elena's phone rang, David's name flashing on the screen. Before she could decide whether to answer, James plucked it from her hands and accepted the call. David, he said pleasantly. How lovely to hear from you so early. Elena could hear David's voice through the speaker, high-pitched and furious. What the hell do you think you're doing, Uncle James? Where is Elena? Elena is exactly where she wants to be, James replied, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. With her husband. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then David exploded. Husband? Are you out of your goddamn mind? You can't marry my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, James corrected smoothly. And I can marry anyone I choose. Elena is a grown woman who makes her own decisions. This is about last night, isn't it? About that stupid misunderstanding with Brittany? Elena felt sick. Misunderstanding? That's what David was calling his betrayal? There was no misunderstanding, David, James said, his voice deadly quiet. Elena saw exactly what you are. We all did. Look, I'll admit I made a mistake, but this is insane. Elena, I know you're listening. We can work this out. We always do. Elena found her voice. No, David. We can't. Not this time. Elena, baby, please. You're just upset. You're not thinking clearly. My uncle is taking advantage of you. Taking advantage? Elena's voice rose. You had your tongue down another woman's throat at your family party, and you think James is taking advantage of me? That meant nothing. Brittany means nothing. You know you're the only one I love. Elena felt tears burning her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. If I meant anything to you, David, you wouldn't have humiliated me like that. Elena! We're done, Elena said firmly. We were done the moment you chose to betray me. She hung up the phone, and immediately it started ringing again. James reached over and turned it off completely. He'll keep calling, Elena said, sinking onto the edge of the bed. Then we'll change your number. James sat beside her, careful to maintain distance. Elena, I know this is complicated, but... Complicated? Elena laughed bitterly. James, I married a man I barely know to get revenge on my cheating ex-boyfriend. Then I slept with you, and now I'm sitting in your apartment, wearing your shirt trying to figure out how to undo the biggest mistake of my life. Complicated doesn't begin to cover it. James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Is that really what you think last night was? A mistake? Elena looked at him, really looked at him. His hair was still damp from the shower, and there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made her heart ache. She remembered how gentle he'd been with her, how he'd made her feel cherished and desired and beautiful. She remembered the way he'd whispered her name like it was sacred. But she also remembered David's betrayal, the humiliation, the way love had turned to ash in her mouth. She couldn't trust her feelings right now. She couldn't trust anything. Yes, she lied. It was a mistake. Something shuddered in James's expression, and he stood abruptly. I see. Well then, I'll have my lawyer draw up annulment papers. You can be free of this mistake by the end of the week. James, don't. His voice was cold now, professional. You've made your position clear. I'll have my driver take you home. Elena wanted to say something, to take back the words that had put that hurt look in his eyes. But fear held her tongue. Fear of being hurt again, fear of trusting too quickly, fear of the intensity of what she felt for this man she barely knew. So she said nothing as James left the room to call his driver. She said nothing as she dressed in last night's clothes. And she said nothing during the silent ride back to her apartment, even though every mile felt like she was leaving a piece of her heart behind. What do you think? Is Elena protecting herself or making the biggest mistake of her life by pushing James away? And what will happen when the truth about their night together comes to light? Let us know what you think in the comments. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in her tiny bathroom staring at 4 positive pregnancy tests lined up on the counter like tiny plastic harbingers of doom. Her hands shook as she picked up the 5th test, hoping against hope that it would somehow show a different result. 2 pink lines. Just like all the others. This can't be happening, she whispered to her reflection. This cannot be happening. But even as denial flooded through her, Elena's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. She'd been feeling off for days, nauseous in the mornings, exhausted by noon, emotional at the drop of a hat. She'd attributed it to stress from the David situation and the guilt over how she'd treated James. James. God, how was she going to tell James? They hadn't spoken since that morning in his penthouse. His lawyer had sent the annulment papers as promised, but Elena hadn't signed them yet. She told herself it was because she'd been busy with work, but the truth was more complicated. Every time she looked at those papers, she remembered the hurt in James's eyes when she'd called their night together a mistake. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Maya. Coffee later? You've been MIA for weeks. Elena couldn't face Maya right now. She couldn't face anyone. She needed to think, needed to figure out what she was going to do. But first, she needed to see a doctor. She needed to know for sure. 2 hours later, Dr. Saracen smiled at Elena from across her desk. Ultrasound images spread between them like a roadmap to Elena's new reality. Congratulations, Elena. You're definitely pregnant. About 4 weeks along. Elena stared at the grainy black and white images, trying to process what she was seeing. Are you sure? Absolutely. And Dr. Chen's smile widened. You might want to sit down for this next part. I am sitting down. You're having multiples. 4, to be exact. The world tilted sideways. 4. As in 4 babies. Quadruplets. It's extremely rare, about 1 in 700,000 pregnancies. You're going to need specialized care, and Dr. Chen's voice faded into background noise as Elena tried to comprehend what she was hearing. 4 babies. For tiny humans growing inside her. For lives that would depend on her completely. For babies that belonged to James Blackwood, a man who thought she regretted ever meeting him. Elena somehow made it home in a daze, the ultrasound images clutched in her trembling hands. She sat on her couch, staring at the annulment papers on her coffee table, and tried to figure out what to do next. She had to tell James. Whatever had happened between them, whatever she'd said in fear and panic, he deserved to know he was going to be a father. 4 times over. Before she could lose her nerve, Elena grabbed her phone and dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. James, it's Elena. We need to talk. It's important. Please call me back. She hung up and waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, her phone rang, but it wasn't James. It was a number she didn't recognize. Elena Martinez? The voice was crisp, professional. Yes. This is Patricia Wells, Mr. Blackwood's assistant. He asked me to return your call. He's currently in meetings all day, but he wanted me to ask if this concerns the annulment papers. If so, he'd like to remind you that they need to be signed and returned by Friday. Elena's heart sank. James was having his assistant handle her calls now. The message was clear. He wanted nothing to do with her. No, Elena said quietly. It's not about the papers. I need to speak with him directly. It's personal. I'm sorry, but Mr. Blackwood's schedule is completely booked for the next 2 weeks. Perhaps I could schedule something for. Tell him I'm pregnant, Elena interrupted, desperation making her voice sharp. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that Elena wondered if the call had dropped. Excuse me? Patricia finally said. Tell him Elena is pregnant. With his babies. Plural. He'll want to take my call. Yes, of course. Please hold. Elena waited, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. After what felt like an eternity, the line clicked. Elena. James's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the shock underneath. Patricia said, Did you say babies? Plural. Quadruplets, Elena said, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. I'm having quadruplets, James. You're quadruplets. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Are you certain? James asked finally. I have ultrasound pictures. 4 heartbeats. The doctor says it's about 1 in 700,000 odds. Jesus. She heard him take a shaky breath. Elena, we need to talk. In person. Now. I tried to call you. I know. I was trying to give you space. To let you move on from your mistake. The bitterness in his voice made Elena wince. James. Not over the phone. I'm coming to get you. We need to discuss this properly. You don't know where I live. I'll find out. Stay put. The line went dead, and Elena stared at her phone in shock. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. Elena opened it to find James standing in her hallway, looking like he'd run the entire way. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and there was something wild in his gray eyes. Show me, he said without preamble. Elena wordlessly handed him the ultrasound images. James studied them with the intensity of a man trying to decode the secrets of the universe. 4, he said softly. 4 babies. James, I know this complicates everything. I know you probably think I'm trying to trap you or... Stop. James looked up from the images, and Elena was surprised to see something that looked almost like wonder in his expression. Just stop talking for a minute. He moved past her into her small apartment, still clutching the ultrasound pictures. Elena watched as he sank onto her couch, his head in his hands. 4 babies, he repeated. We're going to have 4 babies. We don't have to do anything, Elena said quickly. I mean, I understand if you want to sign away your rights. This wasn't planned, and I know you never wanted. James's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. Don't. Don't you dare suggest I would abandon my children. I wasn't suggesting. Yes, you were. You think because you called our night together a mistake, because you couldn't wait to get away from me, that I'm the kind of man who would walk away from his responsibilities. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Elena? Because I'm trying to understand how we went from the most incredible night of my life to you acting like I'm some kind of predator you need to escape from. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? James stood, moving closer to her. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you panicked the moment things got real between us. Elena opened her mouth to deny it, but the words died in her throat. Because he was right. She had panicked. The intensity of what she'd felt for him, the way he'd made her feel cherished and desired and safe, it had terrified her. I was scared, she admitted quietly. Of me. Of how you made me feel. Of how much I wanted. She trailed off, unable to finish. Wanted what? Elena met his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there that he was trying so hard to hide. Wanted it to be real. James was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. And now we're having 4 babies together, and I don't know what's real anymore. James moved closer, close enough that Elena could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. The babies are real, Elena. What happened between us that night was real. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Elena looked down at the annulment papers on her coffee table, then back at James. I don't know. Well, James said, his voice gentle but firm, we have about 8 months to figure it out. Because like it or not, we're in this together now. Do you think Elena and James can make this unexpected situation work? What challenges do you think they'll face as they navigate pregnancy and their complicated feelings? Share your predictions in the comments. 2 weeks into their awkward cohabitation arrangement, Elena discovered that living with James Blackwood was like sharing space with a beautiful, well-mannered stranger who happened to be incredibly thoughtful and devastatingly attractive. He'd insisted she move into his penthouse after her doctor explained the high-risk nature of quadruplet pregnancies, and Elena had been too exhausted to argue. James had converted his home office into a bedroom for her, complete with a hospital-grade bed and every pregnancy book known to mankind. He made her breakfast every morning, left prenatal vitamins by her coffee cup, and somehow always knew exactly what she was craving before she did. But they barely spoke beyond polite pleasantries, dancing around each other like strangers afraid of stepping on landmines. Elena was curled up on his massive couch, reading about the complications of multiple births, when she heard James on the phone in his study. His voice was tense, angry in a way she'd never heard before. No, Mother. I will not be attending Thanksgiving dinner. Because I have other priorities now. That's none of your concern. She's not some gold digger, she's my wife. Elena's heart clenched at the word wife, spoken with such fierce protectiveness. I don't care what David told you. David is a liar and a cheat, and if you choose to believe his version of events over mine, that says more about you than it does about Elena. The conversation continued, growing more heated, until Elena heard James slam the phone down. She waited a few minutes before getting up to check on him, her hand instinctively moving to her still small bump. She found James standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city below. His shoulders were rigid with tension, and there was something broken in his posture that made Elena's chest ache. James, she said softly, are you okay? He didn't turn around. My family wants to meet you. Well, more accurately, they want to interrogate you to determine if you're worthy of the Blackwood name. Oh! Elena moved to stand beside him, studying his reflection in the glass. That was your mother? Margaret Blackwood, yes. Pillar of society, queen of charity galas, and expert at making people feel like insects under a microscope. James's voice was bitter. She's convinced you're some kind of scheming opportunist who seduced her innocent nephew and then trapped her poor, naive son. Maybe I should meet with her. Explain. No. James finally turned to look at her, and Elena was shocked by the pain in his eyes. You don't understand, Elena. My family, they destroy people. It's what they do. Elena frowned. What do you mean? James was quiet for so long that Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the bar cart and poured himself a whiskey, his movements sharp and controlled. I was married before, he said finally. Her name was Catherine. We met in college, got married young, thought we had forever. He took a sip of whiskey, his jaw tight. She was beautiful, brilliant, kind. Everything my family should have loved. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. What happened? My mother happened. My father happened. The whole goddamn Blackwood legacy happened. James's voice was raw with old pain. They decided Catherine wasn't good enough. Her family didn't have enough money, enough connections, enough blue blood. So they set out to destroy her. James. They started small. Snide comments at family gatherings, deliberate exclusions from events. Then they got creative. My father used his connections to get Catherine fired from her job. My mother spread rumors about her character at the country club. They made her life hell, and James's voice broke. I was too young, too naive to understand what they were doing until it was too late. Elena moved closer, her heart breaking for the pain in his voice. What happened to Catherine? She left me. Said she couldn't fight my family anymore, couldn't watch them tear her apart piece by piece. She was right to leave. I should have protected her, should have stood up to them, but I was a coward. James finished his whiskey in one gulp. She moved across the country, changed her name, started over. I never saw her again. James, that wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? He turned to face her, and Elena saw 20 years of guilt and regret in his eyes. I chose my family's approval over the woman I loved. I let them drive away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too weak to fight for her. Elena felt tears burning her eyes. Is that why you've never remarried? I tried dating, but every time things got serious, I could hear my mother's voice in my head. See my father's disapproving stare. I convinced myself it was easier to be alone than to risk putting someone else through what Catherine endured. James set down his empty glass with shaking hands. Until you. James. That night we got married, when you kissed me in that ridiculous chapel, it was the first time in 20 years that I felt alive. Really alive. And when we made love. He looked at her with such intensity that Elena felt her breath catch. I thought maybe I'd been given a second chance. A chance to do things right this time. Elena's heart was pounding. And then I called it a mistake. And then you called it a mistake, James confirmed quietly. Just like Catherine, you couldn't wait to get away from me. And I thought, here we go again. Another woman who realizes that being with a Blackwood isn't worth the pain. Elena moved closer, close enough to see the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. James, I didn't leave because of your family. I left because I was terrified. Of what? Of how much I wanted to stay. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. David hurt me so badly, and then you came along and made me feel things I'd never felt before. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying, and I panicked. James studied her face, searching for something. And now I'm carrying your children, living in your home, and falling a little bit more in love with you every day despite my best efforts not to. The words tumbled out before Elena could stop them, and she immediately wanted to take them back. James went very still. What did you say? Elena's cheeks burned with embarrassment. I said I'm falling in love with you, which is probably the worst possible timing and completely inappropriate given our situation, and I shouldn't have said anything. James crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. Elena stopped talking. But, I love you too, he said simply. I've been in love with you since that first night, and it's been killing me to pretend otherwise. Elena felt tears spill down her cheeks. Really? Really? James brushed away her tears with his thumbs. But Elena, you need to understand what you're signing up for. My family will come after you. They'll try to tear you down, make you feel worthless, drive you away. And this time, I won't let them. Elena covered his hands with hers. I'm not Catherine, James. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now, but when they start their campaign, then we'll face them together. Elena's voice was strong, certain. I'm not some naive college girl, James. I'm a grown woman who's survived heartbreak and betrayal and come out stronger. Your family doesn't scare me. James searched her eyes, looking for any sign of doubt. They'll use the babies against you. Say you trapped me, that you're only after money. Let them try. Elena's chin lifted defiantly. I know who I am, and more importantly, I know who you are. You're not the weak young man who let his family destroy his first marriage. You're stronger now, and so am I. James was quiet for a long moment, then slowly smiled. You really think you can handle the Blackwood family? I think we can handle them together. Elena rose on her tiptoes, bringing her lips closer to his. Besides, I have something Catherine didn't. What's that? Elena grinned. For tiny Blackwoods growing inside me. Let's see your mother try to argue with that kind of legacy. James laughed, the sound rich and warm and full of hope. God, I love you, Elena Martinez Blackwood. I love you too, Elena whispered against his lips. Now kiss me before I lose my nerve. James didn't need to be asked twice. What do you think will happen when Elena finally meets the formidable Blackwood family? Will their love be strong enough to withstand the storm that's coming? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The next few weeks passed in a haze of doctor's appointments, baby shopping, and stolen moments of intimacy that felt both precious and fragile. Elena's pregnancy was progressing well, though the morning sickness had evolved into all-day nausea that left her exhausted and cranky. James had become her devoted caretaker, learning to make ginger tea exactly the way she liked it, and somehow always knowing when she needed a foot rub or just someone to hold her hair back. It was a Saturday morning when Elena woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of James humming in the kitchen. She found him at the stove, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. The sight of him cooking for her, so domestic and natural, made her heart flutter. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, turning to smile at her. "How are my girls feeling today?" Elena had started showing at 12 weeks, and James had taken to talking to her growing bump like the babies could already hear him. The doctor had confirmed that all 4 babies were developing perfectly, and they'd decided to wait to learn the genders, though James had convinced himself they were all girls. "Your girls are hungry," Elena said, settling onto a bar stool at the kitchen island. "And your wife is wondering why you're so convinced they're all female." James flipped a pancake with practiced ease. "Call it intuition. For little princesses who are going to have their daddy wrapped around their tiny fingers." Elena laughed, watching him plate the pancakes with the same precision he brought to everything else. "What if one of them is a boy? Then he'll be the most protected little prince in the world, with 3 sisters to keep him in line." James set the plate in front of her, along with fresh strawberries and the real maple syrup he'd special ordered from Vermont. "Either way, they're going to be perfect." Elena took a bite and moaned with pleasure. "How did you learn to cook like this?" James's expression grew thoughtful as he poured himself coffee. "After Catherine left, I went through a pretty dark period. Drinking too much, working too much, generally feeling sorry for myself. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, finally had enough of my self-pity and taught me to cook. Said a man who couldn't feed himself properly had no business running a company. Smart woman. The smartest. She retired last year, but she still calls to check on me. She's going to love you." James sat beside Elena, his hand automatically moving to rest on her bump. "She always said I needed someone to cook for besides myself." Elena covered his hand with hers, marveling at how natural this felt. "James, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Are you scared?" "About becoming a father, I mean. 4 babies at once is a lot." James was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her belly. "Terrified," he admitted. "I never thought I'd have children. After Catherine, I convinced myself I wasn't father material. Too selfish, too damaged, too much like my own father." Elena turned to face him fully. "You're nothing like your father, James. The way you take care of me, the way you talk to the babies, you're going to be an amazing dad." "How can you be so sure?" "Because you're already loving them, and they're not even born yet. Because you read pregnancy books like they're business reports, and you've already baby-proofed the entire penthouse, even though they won't be mobile for years." Elena smiled softly. "Because you're here, James. You're not running away or making excuses. You're here." James leaned forward and kissed her forehead. "I'm here because I can't imagine being anywhere else." They spent the morning assembling the first of 4 cribs that had been delivered the day before. Elena sat on the floor of what would become the nursery, reading instructions while James wielded an Allen wrench with the determination of a man building a fortress. "Part A connects to Part B using screw C," Elena read, trying not to laugh at James's intense concentration. "There is no Part B," James muttered, surrounded by wooden pieces and hardware. "There are 17 different parts, none of which are labeled B. Maybe it's this piece?" Elena held up a curved wooden rail. James looked at it, then at the instructions, then back at the rail. "How is it possible that I can negotiate million-dollar deals, but I can't figure out how to build a crib?" Elena burst into laughter. "Maybe because babies don't come with contracts and merger agreements?" "They should," James said seriously. "It would make this whole process much more logical." Elena watched him struggle with the crib hardware, her heart swelling with affection. This powerful, sophisticated man was completely undone by the prospect of becoming a father, and it was the most endearing thing she'd ever seen. "James," she said softly. He didn't look up from the instruction manual. I love you. That got his attention. He looked up, his eyes soft and warm. I love you too. Even if you're laughing at my crib building skills. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because you're trying so hard to be perfect at everything, and it's sweet. James set down the Allen wrench and moved to sit beside her on the floor. I want to be perfect for them. For you. I want to be the father they deserve, the husband you deserve. Elena cupped his face in her hands. James, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. The man who makes me ginger tea when I'm sick, who talks to my belly like the babies can hear you, who reads pregnancy books at 3 a.m. because you want to understand what I'm going through. I do read them at 3 a.m, James admitted with a sheepish smile. I know. I hear you turning pages. Elena kissed him softly. You're going to be an incredible father, James. Not because you're perfect, but because you care so much. James pulled her closer, careful of her growing bump. What did I do to deserve you? You married me in a tacky Vegas chapel and then made love to me like I was the most precious thing in the world, Elena said against his lips. Best decision I ever made, James murmured, deepening the kiss. They were interrupted by Elena's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen and groaned. It's Maya. I've been avoiding her calls for weeks. Answer it, James said. You need your friends, Elena. Especially now. Elena hesitated, then accepted the call. Hey, Maya. Elena Martinez, where the hell have you been? I've been worried sick. Maya's voice was sharp with concern and irritation. I'm sorry, I've been busy. Busy? Elena, you disappeared after David's party, and no one's heard from you since. David's been calling everyone looking for you, saying you ran off with his uncle or some crazy story. It's not a crazy story, Elena interrupted. I did marry his uncle. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. You what? Maya finally squeaked. Elena looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. I married James Blackwood. And Maya, I'm pregnant. With quadruplets. Another long silence then. I'm coming over. Right now. Don't move. The line went dead, and Elena stared at her phone. She's coming over. James stood and offered her his hand. Good. It's time you stopped hiding from your life, Elena. Our life. Elena let him pull her to her feet, her heart racing with nerves and anticipation. What if she thinks I've lost my mind? Then we'll convince her otherwise. Together. James kissed her temple. Besides, she's your best friend. She wants you to be happy. And am I? Elena asked, looking around the half-assembled nursery, at the man who'd become her anchor in the storm. Happy, I mean? James smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. Are you? Elena thought about the past few weeks, the morning sickness and the fear, but also the gentle touches and whispered conversations with her growing babies. She thought about James reading to her belly every night, about the way he looked at her like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe was real. Yes, she said, surprised by the certainty in her voice. I'm happy. Then that's all that matters, James said, pulling her into his arms. Everything else, we'll figure out together. Do you think Elena's best friend Maya will support her unexpected marriage and pregnancy? How do you think she'll react to meeting James? Share your predictions in the comments. Maya arrived 30 minutes later like a hurricane in designer jeans, her dark hair wild and her eyes blazing with a mixture of concern and fury. Elena opened the door to find her best friend standing in the hallway with her arms crossed, looking like she was ready for battle. Okay, Maya said, pushing past Elena into the penthouse. Start talking. And I mean everything, because David has been spinning some insane story about you having a breakdown and… She stopped mid-sentence as she took in the luxurious apartment, then spotted James emerging from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. You must be Maya, James said smoothly, setting the cups on the coffee table. I'm James. It's a pleasure to meet you. Maya stared at him, her mouth slightly open. Elena could practically see her best friend's brain trying to process the situation. The obvious wealth, James's devastating good looks, the way he moved around the apartment like he belonged there. You're really him, Maya said finally. David's uncle. The one who married your best friend, yes. James's voice was calm, but Elena caught the slight tension in his shoulders. Elena's told me a lot about you. Maya turned to Elena, her expression a mixture of shock and concern. Elena, what the hell is going on? And don't give me some sanitized version. I want the truth. Elena sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. The stress of keeping secrets from her best friend, combined with the pregnancy hormones, was making her emotional. It's complicated, Maya. Complicated? Elena, you disappeared for weeks, married a man you barely know, and now you're pregnant with quadruplets? Complicated doesn't begin to cover it. James moved to sit beside Elena, his hand automatically finding hers. The gesture wasn't lost on Maya, whose sharp eyes caught every detail. I know how it looks, Elena said quietly. But Maya, I love him. I know it sounds crazy, but… Love him? Maya's voice rose an octave. Elena, you've known him for what, 2 months? And you're having his babies? This is insane. Maya, please. No, Elena. I'm your best friend, and it's my job to tell you when you're making a huge mistake. And this is the biggest mistake of your life. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She'd known Maya would be shocked, but she hadn't expected this level of hostility. James squeezed her hand gently. Maya, I understand your concern for Elena. She's lucky to have a friend who cares so much about her welfare. Don't, Maya snapped, turning her attention to James. Don't try to charm me with your smooth voice and expensive suit. I know exactly what this is. And what is that? James's voice remained calm, but Elena could see the storm brewing in his gray eyes. A rich man taking advantage of a woman who was vulnerable and heartbroken. Elena was devastated after David's betrayal, and you swooped in like some kind of predator. Maya. Elena stood abruptly, her hands shaking with anger. That's enough. Is it? Elena, look at this place. Look at him. Do you really think a man like James Blackwood falls in love with an elementary school teacher from the wrong side of town? Wake up. The words hit Elena like physical blows. Every insecurity she'd been fighting, every doubt she'd pushed aside, came rushing back with devastating force. Maya was voicing all the fears Elena had been trying to ignore. That she wasn't good enough for James, that this was all too good to be true, that she was just another naive woman being used by a wealthy man. Maya, you don't understand, Elena started. I understand perfectly. You're pregnant and scared, and he's offering you security. But Elena, what happens when he gets bored? What happens when his family decides you're not suitable? What happens to you and those babies then? James stood slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury. I think you should leave. I'm not going anywhere until Elena comes to her senses, Maya shot back. Elena, you're my best friend. I've known you for 15 years. This isn't you. You don't make impulsive decisions, you don't marry strangers, and you certainly don't get pregnant by men you barely know. You're right, Elena said quietly, her voice barely audible. This isn't me. James turned to look at her, and Elena saw something like panic flash in his eyes. Elena. Maya's right, James. I don't do things like this. I'm careful, I'm practical, I think things through. Elena's voice was getting stronger, more certain. But I threw all of that away for what? For a man who's going to get tired of playing house with the poor teacher. That's not what this is, James said urgently. Elena, you know that's not what this is. Do I? Elena looked around the penthouse, seeing it through Maya's eyes. The obvious wealth, the vast difference in their social status, the impossibility of their situation. Maya, what did David tell you? About that night. Maya glanced between Elena and James, clearly uncomfortable. He said you were upset about a misunderstanding with some girl, and that James took advantage of your emotional state. He said James has a history of this kind of thing. A history? Elena turned to James, her heart pounding. What is she talking about? James's face had gone pale. Elena, David is lying. He's trying to poison you against me. Is he? Because you never told me about other women, James. You told me about Catherine, but what about after her? What about the women you've dated in the past 20 years? That's not relevant. It's completely relevant. Elena's voice was rising, hysteria creeping in. Maya, what else did David say? Maya looked miserable, but she continued. He said James has a pattern. That he targets vulnerable women, makes them feel special, then discards them when he gets bored. He said there have been others. Women who thought they were special, who thought James loved them. Elena felt like she was drowning. Is that true, James? Have there been others? James ran his hands through his hair, his composure finally cracking. Elena, yes, I've dated other women. But none of them meant anything. None of them were you. How do I know that? How do I know I'm not just another in a long line of women you've charmed and discarded? Because you're carrying my children. James's voice was raw with desperation. Because I married you. Because I love you. You married me by accident, Elena shot back. And the babies were an accident too. Maybe this whole thing is just you making the best of a bad situation. Elena, please. You're letting David get in your head. You're letting fear make you doubt what we have. But Elena was spiraling now, all her insecurities and fears crashing down on her at once. What do we have, James? Really? A few weeks of playing house? Some good sex? A marriage that started as a joke? James flinched as if she'd slapped him. Is that really what you think? Elena looked at him, this beautiful, sophisticated man who was so far out of her league it was laughable, and felt her heart break all over again. I think I'm a fool who let herself believe in fairy tales. Elena, I think Maya's right. I think I need to wake up and face reality. Elena's voice was cold now, distant. The reality is that we're from different worlds, James. And eventually, you're going to realize that too. James stared at her for a long moment, something dying in his eyes. I see. So that's it? You're going to let David win? You're going to let him destroy what we have, just like my family destroyed what I had with Catherine. There's nothing to destroy, Elena said, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. This was never real. James went very still, his face becoming a mask of cold politeness. I see. Well then, I suppose there's nothing left to discuss. He turned and walked toward his study, his movements sharp and controlled. At the doorway, he paused without turning around. For what it's worth, Elena, I meant every word I said to you. Every promise, every declaration of love. But you're right about one thing. We are from different worlds. In my world, when you love someone, you fight for them. You don't give up at the first sign of trouble. The study door closed with a quiet click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Elena sank back onto the couch, her hands instinctively moving to her belly. Maya sat beside her, her anger replaced by concern. Elena, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I'm worried about you. You're right to be worried, Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm an idiot who fell in love with a man who's going to break my heart. But even as she said the words, Elena knew they weren't true. James wasn't going to break her heart. She'd just done it herself. Do you think Elena just made the biggest mistake of her life by pushing James away? Can their love survive this devastating confrontation, or has the damage been done? What would you do in Elena's situation? Let us know in the comments. 3 days passed in suffocating silence. James had retreated to his study and barely emerged, communicating only through terse notes left on the kitchen counter about doctor's appointments and prenatal vitamins. Elena wandered the penthouse like a ghost, her heart breaking a little more each time she passed his closed door. Maya had left that terrible night with promises to call, but Elena hadn't answered her phone. She couldn't face her best friend's well-meaning concern or her questions about what came next. Elena didn't know what came next. All she knew was that she destroyed the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to her because she was too scared to believe she deserved it. On Thursday morning, Elena woke to find a manila envelope on the kitchen counter with her name written in James's precise handwriting. Inside were legal documents, custody agreements, financial arrangements, and a note in his familiar script. Asterisk Elena. My lawyer has drawn up these documents to ensure you and the children are provided for, regardless of what happens between us. You'll never want for anything, and neither will they. I've also included information about a house in Malibu that I think you'd like. It's yours if you want it, along with a trust fund that will cover all expenses for you and the babies. I won't contest the annulment if that's what you truly want. I just ask that you think carefully about what you're giving up. Not the money or the security. I know those things don't matter to you. But the love, Elena. The real, honest love that we found together. I meant what I said that night in Vegas, and every night since. You are not a mistake. What we have is not a mistake. But I can't fight for us alone. The choice is yours. James asterisk. Elena read the note 3 times, tears blurring her vision. Even now, even after she'd shattered his heart with her cruel words, James was taking care of her, making sure she and the babies would be safe and provided for. It was exactly what a good man would do, and it made her feel even worse about how she'd treated him. She was still sitting at the kitchen counter, staring at the documents, when her phone rang. Dr. Chen's name appeared on the screen, and Elena answered with a heavy heart. Elena, I need you to come in today for an emergency ultrasound, Dr. Chen said without preamble. Elena's blood turned to ice. Is something wrong with the babies? I'm not sure. Your blood work from yesterday showed some concerning levels, and I want to check on the babies immediately. Can you be here in an hour? Yes, of course. I'll be right there. Elena hung up and stared at James's closed study door. She needed to tell him, needed him with her for this appointment. But after everything she'd said, After the way she'd dismissed their love as meaningless, did she have the right to ask for his support? Before she could lose her nerve, Elena knocked on the study door. "Come in." James's voice was carefully neutral. Elena opened the door to find James sitting behind his desk, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. The sight of him looking so broken made Elena's chest ache. "Dr. Chen called," Elena said quietly. "She wants to see me immediately. Something about my blood work." James was on his feet instantly, all pretense of distance forgotten. "What's wrong? Are the babies okay?" "I don't know. She just said she needs to do an emergency ultrasound." Elena's voice cracked. "James, I'm scared." Without hesitation, James crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. Elena melted against him, breathing in his familiar scent and feeling safe for the first time in days. "It's going to be okay," James murmured against her hair. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." "We." Elena pulled back to look at him. "James, after what I said." "Elena, I don't care what you said. You're carrying my children, and I love you. Nothing else matters right now." The drive to the doctor's office was tense and silent, but James held her hand the entire way, his thumb tracing soothing circles on her palm. In the waiting room, Elena watched him pace like a caged animal, his usual composure completely shattered. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood?" A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Dr. Chen will see you now." Dr. Chen's expression was serious as she prepared the ultrasound equipment. "Elena, your blood pressure has been elevated, and there are some protein levels that concern me. I want to check on the babies and make sure everything is progressing normally." Elena lay back on the examination table, James standing beside her with his hand gripping hers tightly. The ultrasound gel was cold against her skin, and Elena held her breath as Dr. Chen moved the wand across her belly. For heartbeats filled the room, strong and steady. Elena felt tears of relief stream down her face. "The babies look good," Dr. Chen said, her expression softening. "All four are developing normally, good heart rates, appropriate size for gestational age." "Then what's wrong?" James asked, his voice tight with worry. "Elena, you're showing early signs of preeclampsia. It's not uncommon with multiple pregnancies, but we need to monitor you very closely. This means bed rest, reduced stress, and frequent checkups." Elena felt the world tilt. "Bed rest? For how long?" "Potentially for the rest of your pregnancy." "I know it sounds daunting, but Elena, preeclampsia can be very serious if left untreated. For both you and the babies." James squeezed her hand. "Whatever you need, we'll make it work." Dr. Chen looked between them, noting the obvious tension. "Elena, I also need to stress the importance of emotional well-being during this time. Stress can exacerbate preeclampsia. You need to be in a calm, supportive environment." After the appointment, James drove them home in silence. Elena stared out the window, processing everything Dr. Chen had told them. Bed rest for potentially 4 more months. Complete dependence on James's care. And the terrifying possibility that her stress and emotional turmoil had contributed to this complication. "James," she said as they rode the elevator up to the penthouse. "I can't ask you to take care of me. Not after what I said." James stopped the elevator between floors and turned to face her. "Elena, look at me." She met his eyes, seeing the pain and love warring in their gray depths. "I don't care what you said. I don't care that you're scared or that you think we're too different or that you believe I'm going to leave you. I'm not going anywhere." His voice was fierce, determined. "You are the mother of my children, and I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life. So you can push me away, you can build walls, you can convince yourself that this isn't real, but I'm not leaving." Elena felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. "James, I'm not my father, Elena. I'm not David. I'm not going to abandon you when things get difficult." James cupped her face in his hands. "But I need you to make a choice. Really make it this time. Do you want to fight for us, or do you want to keep running?" Elena looked into his eyes and saw her future. Not the money or the security, but the love. The real, honest, terrifying love that she'd been too scared to believe in. "I want to fight," she whispered. "James, I'm so sorry. I was scared and I let Maya's words get in my head, and I said terrible things." "Sho." James silenced her with a gentle kiss. "We both said things we didn't mean. What matters is what we do now." Elena kissed him back, pouring all her love and regret and hope into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Elena said, the words feeling like a vow. "I love you, and I want this to work." I want us to work. Then we will, James said simply. Whatever it takes, Elena. We're going to make this work. As the elevator resumed its climb, Elena felt something settle in her chest. Not just love, but certainty. She'd made her choice, and for the first time since that night in Vegas, she wasn't running from it. She was running toward it. Elena has finally made her choice to fight for love. But will it be enough? With her high-risk pregnancy and the challenges ahead, do you think James and Elena can build the family they both dream of? Share your thoughts on their journey in the comments. For months later, Elena woke to the familiar sensation of James's hand gently rubbing her enormous belly. At 36 weeks pregnant with quadruplets, she looked like she was smuggling a small planet under her nightgown. But James still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. "Good morning, my loves," he whispered to her belly, his daily ritual of greeting each baby individually. "Daddy's here. Mommy's here. We're all here together." Elena smiled, her hand covering his. The past 4 months of bed rest had been challenging, but they'd also been the most precious months of her life. James had worked from home, setting up his office in their bedroom, so he could be near her. He'd read to her belly every night, assembled 4 cribs with only minimal cursing, and somehow made being confined to bed feel like an adventure rather than a prison. "How are we feeling today?" James asked, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Like I'm about to explode," Elena said with a laugh. "But Dr. Chin says that's normal at this stage." 36 weeks with quadruplets, James marveled, his hand tracing the curve of her belly. "You're incredible, Elena. Absolutely incredible." Elena was about to respond when a sharp pain shot through her abdomen, followed by a warm gush of fluid. She looked down in shock, then met James's eyes. "I think my water just broke," she said calmly. James went very still for a moment, then exploded into action. Okay, this is happening. The hospital bag is by the door, the car seat bases are already installed, Dr. Chun is on speed dial." "James," Elena said gently, catching his hand as he started to pace. "Breathe." He stopped and looked at her, this woman who was about to give birth to 4 babies, and was somehow the calmest person in the room. "How are you so calm?" "Because I'm not doing this alone," Elena said simply. "I have you." The next few hours passed in a blur of contractions, hospital corridors, and medical teams preparing for the arrival of the Blackwood quadruplets. Elena was wheeled into the delivery room with James beside her, both of them wearing surgical scrubs and expressions of nervous excitement. "Are you ready for this?" Dr. Chin asked, her team of specialists positioned around the room. Elena looked at James, seeing her own mixture of terror and joy reflected in his eyes. "We're ready." What followed was the most intense, beautiful, terrifying experience of Elena's life. For tiny cries filled the delivery room in quick succession, each one making Elena's heart expand until she thought it might burst. "Baby A, a girl, born at 2:47 p.m., Dr. Chin announced, placing the tiny, perfect baby on Elena's chest. Elena looked down at her daughter, their daughter, and felt tears stream down her face. She was so small, so perfect, with James's dark hair and what looked like Elena's nose. Baby B, a boy born at 2:49 p.m. James was crying now too, his hand gently stroking their son's tiny head as the nurses cleaned him. Baby C, a girl born at 2:52 p.m. Baby D, another girl, born at 2:54 p.m. 4 babies. 3 girls and 1 boy, just as James had predicted. Elena looked around the room at the controlled chaos of medical staff caring for their children, then at James, who was staring at their babies like he couldn't quite believe they were real. "We did it," Elena whispered. "You did it," James corrected, leaning down to kiss her. "You were amazing." Later, when they were settled in the recovery room with 4 tiny bassinets arranged around Elena's bed, James sat in the chair beside her, holding their son while Elena cradled one of their daughters. "Have you thought about names?" Elena asked, studying the perfect little face in her arms. "Actually, yes." James looked almost shy. "I was thinking, if you agree, we could name our son Alexander. After my grandfather, the only member of my family who ever showed me what real love looked like." Elena smiled. "Alexander Blackwood. I love it. And for the girls, I thought maybe Isabella, Sophia, and..." James paused, his voice growing soft. "Catherine, if that's okay with you." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Naming one of their daughters after James's first love, the woman whose memory had haunted him for so long, felt like a beautiful way to honor the past while embracing their future. "Isabella, Sophia, and Catherine," Elena repeated. They're perfect names. A soft knock on the door interrupted them, and Maya peeked her head in. Elena's relationship with her best friend had been strained since that terrible night, but Maya had slowly come around as she watched James care for Elena during her bed rest. "Can I come in?" Maya asked tentatively. "Of course," Elena said, gesturing inside. Maya approached the bassinets with wonder, her eyes wide as she took in the 4 tiny babies. "Elena, they're beautiful. Absolutely beautiful." "Maya, meet Isabella, Sophia, Catherine, and Alexander," Elena said, pointing to each bassinet. Maya was quiet for a long moment, then turned to James. "I owe you an apology. A big one." James looked up from baby Alexander, his expression gentle. "Maya, you were protecting your friend. I understand that." "No, I was being judgmental and cruel. I let David's lies poison my opinion of you. And I almost cost Elena the best thing that ever happened to her." Maya's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. Apology accepted," James said simply. "Elena needs her best friend, especially now." Maya smiled through her tears. "Can I hold one of them?" "Of course," Elena said, carefully transferring baby Sophia to Maya's arms. As Elena watched her best friend coo over her daughter, she felt a deep sense of completeness settle over her. This was her family, James, their 4 perfect babies, and the people who loved them. "Elena," James said softly, and she turned to find him watching her with an expression of pure adoration. "Thank you." "For what?" "For taking a chance on us. For fighting for us. For giving me the family I never thought I'd have." James leaned over and kissed her gently. "For loving me enough to believe in forever." Elena looked around the room, at their 4 sleeping babies, at Maya holding Sophia like she was made of spun glass, at James whose eyes held all the love in the world, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. "James," she said, echoing the words he'd spoken to her that first night in Vegas, "I do." "I do too," he whispered back. "Forever and always." Outside the hospital window, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. But inside room 314, a new day was just beginning for the Blackwood family. A day filled with love, laughter, and the beautiful chaos of 4 tiny miracles who had brought their parents together in the most unexpected way. Elena closed her eyes and smiled, finally understanding that sometimes the best love stories begin with the biggest mistakes. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those mistakes turn out to be the greatest blessings of all. What an incredible journey from a revenge marriage to true love and a family of 6. Elena and James proved that real love can overcome any obstacle. What was your favorite moment in their story? Do you believe in love at first sight, or do you think the best relationships grow from unexpected beginnings? Share your thoughts and your own love story experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. This is crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Thank you once again for watching. Bye for now.